On September the 2nd of 2017, over 4 years ago, this journey began. I just finished recording This JW Life, my first podcast. Check it out if you haven't yet. And people were coming to me because they didn't want it to stop. Some actually wanted me to help them tell their own stories, and thus the Shun podcast was started. At first, I didn't have the confidence as an interviewer, and honestly, I didn't really want to become some ex-Jehovah's Witness personality, but I was willing to help. So for the first few episodes, I would interview people, I'd remove my audio, and then I'd use their answers to create the episodes without me in them. Then I met David in episode 6. I wasn't able to hide anymore, and it forced me to come out and be the interviewer. People liked it. Heck, previous guests had actually asked for it, but this whole podcasting journey had been one of growth for me as well. I started This JW Life to try to force myself out there, to tell my own story, to own my own story, and to try to help other people to understand what it was like as one of Jehovah's Witnesses, and to hopefully help others to heal too. After I owned my own story, it was time to help others to do the same, and it's been a wild and very fulfilling ride over these past 4 years. So between This JW Life and Shunned, we're currently sitting at somewhere over 615,000 views and downloads. And that's just, that's insane to me. I never really thought that would happen. I thought when I started This JW Life, I thought maybe 50 people might listen, maybe some of my new friends or family that I hadn't seen in so long. But I never would have envisioned what this has become. So let me give you a little behind the scenes information, a little behind the scenes look at the podcast and everything that I do. I think it might be interesting for some. So for one thing, I usually really know very little about the person that I'm interviewing. In fact, I kind of try not to, because I want to stay curious and try to ask questions that I would want to know if I was a listener. So I try to host the show like I'm the listener in the moment and asking questions to try to find out the answers to the questions that I would have if I was listening. So what you're seeing and hearing is very real and very raw. Some guests have prepared for the interview. Others have not. Some people are very nervous. Others are not. I like to try to go in chronological order with the questions that I ask. But, sometimes we start the episode and the guest kind of jumps in at the end. And then I do my best to kind of work things back around so that we can get some context as to how things ended up. Some people have a lot to say. Some people maybe need a little more prompting. But the goal is for every story to stand for itself. It's about the person that I'm interviewing. It's not about me. Honestly, it's not about you. It's about their life encapsulated in one tidy package that they often find very healing to listen back to. So although we see some of our stories in the moment when I'm interviewing somebody, I'm here for them, and I'm here to give them a space to tell their story in their own way that is reflective of who they are, whether they're a detail-oriented person or they're a person that finds humor in things, or whatever the case may be. I try to make it a reflection of that person in that moment. Something else that people don't often realize unless they've been on the show is that I do a pre-interview with people, or basically when we get together to have the interview, I always talk to people a little bit. I want to give them a chance to warm up, me as well. Some of our personalities will click better than others. We may have different communication styles, whatever the case may be. So I want to give people a chance to get a feel for what they're about to do. I want to give people a chance to talk to me. I kind of can see what their vibe is during the pre-interview. And, then when we go into the interview, look, some interviews are going to be more fun for me. Others are really tough and heavy. Again, it depends on kind of how we click. It depends on where the person is coming from when they're coming to me that day. But in the end, we make this work and turn it into something that helps them as a guest, and then hopefully you as a listener as well. And it ends up being a beautiful thing. And I also like to do things to try to keep it fresh, I guess, a bit. there's been many iterations as time has gone by. There's been different theme songs. There was no video. Now there is video. Again, this has all been a growth process for me. I didn't start out as some sort of audio engineer or anything else. I was just telling my own story. And so all this has kind of grown from that, and it's all been a process. So, this is episode 100, and I wanted to freshen it up a bit. So if you're listening to this on the audio podcast, then you're noticing a new theme song. That song is Save Myself by Jane and the Boy. So I hope you'll listen to the episode all the way through to the end, because the song actually has a really good message, and I think you'll like it. And then, of course, here we are. This is my new YouTube studio. So I worked very hard to design this as well. So I hope you like it. I'm a novice set designer. I haven't done this very often, but I wanted something that I felt more was along the vibe of what I wanted to put out there on my YouTube channel. So I hope this is something that you enjoy as well. In fact, there's going to be other changes coming. For those of you that skip the intro and the outro every episode, you know exactly like how many minutes and seconds it is. Well, there's not going to be an intro anymore to skip. So we're just going to go straight from the theme song right into the interview. And that's pretty much what I do on YouTube anyway. So it depends on what format you're partaking of this in. I will start having what I'm calling a midtro in the middle somewhere. It'll be in different places, but just a little brief information to people that are just finding this for the first time, or maybe that are looking for a specific resource. So I'm going to scale that down to make it a little bit quicker. And then the outro is also going to be more streamlined, and then the rest of the song to end. So I am trying to make that a little more streamlined so that we can just get right to the story and jump in. Something else I'm working on. I'm also working on an update episode where guests from the first 100 episodes that choose to participate, of course, can give updates on their lives, give some insight into what being on the podcast and also your support meant to them. This episode is going to be exclusively available as a bonus reward to all Patreon subscribers at patreon.com/shunned. So this is just a Patreon bonus for them. But feel free to sign up. You can sign up for as little as $1 and get that bonus episode and also help support the show. I've also got some ideas for some new types of episodes, and of course I have many more amazing stories coming. I just have so many things I'd like to do, but at the end of the day, I am just one person, and there's only so many hours in the day. The episode that you hear or see that is often 2 or 3 hours for you to listen to or partake in may take me 8 hours to arrange, record, edit, produce, upload, advertise. There's a lot that goes into this, and that doesn't even count all of the emails and messages that come from each episode that I respond to or that I forward on to the person that was the guest. So, all of these things, messaging the guests afterward, they may have questions, or I may be sending them comments that people have sent to me. So there's just so much that goes on, and it really does take a lot of time. If you listen for any amount of time now, or if you follow me at all, then you know that I'm a life coach that specializes in cult recovery. I've been doing this now for just over 2 years, I think. I often work with about 4 to 8 people per day, mostly ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, but sometimes people that come from other cults as well, or maybe it's a person that's related to one of Jehovah's Witnesses and they're trying to get some understanding. And then, of course, I'm also a general life coach, so sometimes I just work with people that have never been in a cult and just want something better out of their life. I've been able to do this full time. I absolutely love what I do. I absolutely love the people that I get to work with as well. And, my wife and I worked really hard to allow me to do what I do today and at the rates that I do it at, so that we can help more people. If you know our story from this JW life, you know that we were in massive debt. We really had not handled our money well as Jehovah's Witnesses. I mean, few do. It's not like they taught us anything, and there was no education, and just wasn't a really good environment for that. So we worked really hard for a year and a half to pay off that initial debt load that we had that was really crippling us. And we didn't stop there. So we kept working in order to put ourselves in a certain position. And that position that we put ourselves into was one where my wife, she still cleans houses for some really wonderful families, but I can devote my time to my coaching practice, to the people that I work with, and I can do so at rates that are lower than most coaches out there. So, I charge $50 per hour as a base fee. There are some people that I know are not going to be able to afford that. So I have rates as low as $25 an hour. And when everybody pays what they legitimately can, those who can pay 50 do so, and those who can't don't, but they pay somewhere in between. And that's great. It all works out. It's kind of like a donation arrangement that we had as Jehovah's Witnesses, only you actually get help from it, or and others do as well. I've also got a scholarship program where lovely people in my Facebook group have donated funds in order to help people that aren't able to afford anything to be able to get help. So I agreed to lower my fee to the lowest at $25 for the session. And then that helps stretch that money, and we all work together. And I've been able to work with people who maybe don't have an income. Maybe they lost everybody in their life. They don't have a place to live. Maybe they don't have a job, or they're barely scraping by. So it's been a really beautiful opportunity to start something that has really helped a lot of people. And, I'm not telling you this to pump myself up. What I'm doing is, I am proud of everything that has come from these last 4 years, but I'm also very humbled by it. And I just kind of thought I would share kind of the state of things and what has come out of this last 4 years. I just started recording a podcast out of my basement on a $25 Microsoft headset with a free audio program and my laptop. And I really never intended or expected it to be all of this. I had no idea. And so I'm in awe of what it has become. I think it's really cool that so many positive things have come out of that, and people have been able to get help. I've been able to be in a position to help at times as well. And I'm just really happy about it all. So I thought I would share that. So because of all of this, because of the podcasts, all of the people I've been able to coach over the past 2 years in my private coaching practice, all of these first 100 interviews that I've done for the podcast, the guests that I've met, because of my Facebook support group, because of the years of being on other groups and helping, or just observing, because of running my own small Zoom group coaching events and all these things, I've realized a lot of helpful things. And today, for the 100th episode, I wanted to share 100 things that you need to know in order to heal from the cult of Jehovah's Witnesses. Now, some of these things will be concepts that can help you heal. Others are going to be realizations that maybe help you notice a pattern that you're repeating in life that needs addressing. Some will be observations that will help you to feel less alone and hopefully more understood. And others may be direct insights that help you heal. I can't really go deep into all of them. There's 100 things here. If I did 5 minutes on each, we'd have an 8-9 hour episode, and I don't think anybody really is looking for that. But I do hope that these things will spark conversations and healing in some way for each and every one of you. So whether you're listening, whether you're watching, I don't know, grab a pen and paper, take some notes. Maybe there's something in here that strikes you. Maybe there's something in here that would help a friend of yours, or whatever the case may be. But feel free to share this information. Use this in your own life, because at the end of the day, I do all of this to help, and I hope that you find this helpful. So let's go ahead and jump in. Number 1, cults are narcissistic and create codependency. In the organization of Jehovah's Witnesses, there's very little empathy. It's a world full of blame and moralizing. And, a narcissist is not a person that is able to mirror you. They can't see you. When they look at the world, they look at it through their own lens. And does this reflect me? Does this person reflect me? Does this belief system reflect me? And if you, as the person on the other side, do not reflect back to the narcissist what they want to see, then they have no use for you. And so you're out. And if you're not out, then they're going to blame you and coerce you and control you till you become what they want. But the problem with that is that then it creates codependency on the other side. So we, on the other side of the narcissist, end up people pleasing and losing ourselves, trying to keep the narcissist happy, always, putting ourselves down here and putting everybody else up here, trying to manage everybody else's emotions, keep everybody else happy. And that's not really a healthy way to live. So this is one of the things that comes from living that life as one of Jehovah's Witnesses. But it's also something that for a lot of us, if we're honest and we really look at our family situation, most of us had some narcissism and some codependency. Maybe once one of our parents was more of a narcissist, one was more of a codependent. Maybe they were both narcissists, whatever the case may be. But for a lot of us, if we're honest about it, and we really look at it and start to get into what narcissism looks like, we will see that a lot of that was in our family as well. And it has obviously impacted us. Number 2, this is something that I don't really hear a lot on any other channels. But many people were shamed for very personal things. It gets back to that narcissism and that control. But people were shamed for their smile, for their teeth, for their laugh, for their physical appearance, for their sense of humor, for their memory, their intellect, whatever, because they had a blemish on their forehead. Whatever the case, there was so much focus on appearance, being around so many narcissists, that a lot of us were really beaten down and really made to feel bad about ourselves for things that should be embraced. Maybe that laugh is endearing, or it's just really a harmful thing that I see. I see it in my coaching practice a lot, and I really hate seeing people hiding their smile. That's such a sad thing to have to do because someone has told you that your smile is not okay. What a personal affront. And I'm just sorry that so many had to endure that. But if that was you, you're not alone. Sadly, that happened way too often. Number 3, boundaries need to be learned. There's no room for boundaries in a cult. Boundaries are where you end and I begin. And in a cult, you had to be just like them. So there is no you and I. There's us. We are the cult, right? So we all kind of had to be the same. Boundaries were actively discouraged and passively manipulated past. So there was no room for that. And that's something that we all have to learn after we leave the cult. Number 4, gaslighting. Gaslighting is one of the reasons that none of us had boundaries in the first place, or could ever feel good enough. Never feeling like you could ever be good enough is one of the hallmarks of all ex-cult members. We were groomed to detach from our sense of identity and independence, to distrust ourselves, and ultimately so that we would trust the narcissists that were in control at every level. So whether it was through outright lies, denying that they had said things that they said, weaponizing scriptures and telling us not to lean on our own understanding, not to trust our own heart, to lead ourselves as a slave, using words that didn't match their actions to confuse us, throwing in random positive reinforcement when we were about to break to reel us back in, or telling others that there's something wrong with us, or telling us that there's something wrong with others, or telling us that there's something wrong with us. All of these things are used in gaslighting to create distrust of yourself, to detach you from trusting yourself so that you have to trust them. It's a power move. It's a power move of narcissists to keep control over you. And so that's one of the reasons that we lack boundaries, or we may not have much of a sense of identity in the first place. They didn't want us to have one because it didn't serve them. Number 5, growing up in a cult creates learned helplessness. always looking to others to make decisions for us, checking articles in the Watchtower magazines for every answer to life's questions. We have to start to learn to do things on our own. It means doing our own research and then realizing that the answer isn't always black and white. It's not always all or nothing. It's often some shade of gray. There isn't always one right answer, and we have to be able to trust ourselves to determine that. And that's a whole new concept for most of us. Number 6 is one of the ones that honestly I think makes me the angriest. It hurts the most to see, and that is the effects of the sexual repression of the cult of Jehovah's Witnesses. Obviously, things like homosexuality were, I wanted to say discouraged. They weren't discouraged, they were outright condemned. But even sex between consenting partners, whether it was outside of marriage or whether it was in a committed relationship, they still were able to repress that. They were able to get in there and tell you what you could do in your own bedroom or how you could experience pleasure. And I mean, really, it's just all sexual abuse. You can be sexually abused without being touched in these types of ways. And it results in a lot of different things for people. Some people, because of that sexual repression, then become hypersexual. And then other people, because of that repression, shut down. They completely shut down their sexuality. And it's not healthy. And I think one of the reasons that it makes me the angriest is because your sexual expression is one thing that is just yours. It's uniquely yours. It is one of the most intimate parts of your being. And because of that, having that shut down and infiltrated by a cult, it's just really disgusting to me. I hate that they do that to people and rob people of so much joy in life and connection with other individuals. And just, while we're on the topic, it's kind of an aside a little bit, but we just talked about boundaries a second ago. Consent is something that was never talked about. Consent and boundaries kind of go hand in hand. And there is no consent in a cult. The consent is always implied. And there's a lot of talk about wives rendering their due to their husbands and all of this stuff. These are things that also need to be talked about. And these are things that may be impacting your life in ways that you don't really realize. And might be some ways that you could find more joy and fulfillment in your own relationships and in your sexuality, and that is by exploring these types of topics. Number 7, we can be addicted to things that aren't alcohol or drugs or sex or food, video games, whatever the case may be. We can also be addicted to belief. And if you think about it, a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses are addicted to being Jehovah's Witnesses. My dad was a person that had a lot of health problems later in life because he neglected himself. So he dealt with diabetes, kidney failure. He was literally blind in one eye and couldn't see out of the other. He had a cataract on the other one. My dad was not in good shape physically, but my dad was at every meeting. And my dad was out in service every Saturday and Sunday. And my dad gave every public talk that they asked him to give. It wasn't optional to him. It was compulsory. He had to do it. My dad I believe he fell off stages giving public talks because he had neuropathy and he couldn't feel his feet very well. So I'm pretty sure I heard of him passing out at a public talk before. I know he fell off people's porches out in field service. He was doing things that were physically dangerous because he was addicted to the belief system. He was addicted to the meetings. This was a compulsion. This was not something that he was doing just because he loved it in some way or loved Jehovah. No, this was his life. This is what he did. He was caught up in it. And so that's just a model to look at this through, almost an addiction model that is a pretty interesting lens to shine on it, and also something that can sometimes help us understand the people that are in and ourselves at times when we were in. Number 8, when somebody dies, we tend to remember the best parts of them, kind of idealize them. We tend to let bygones be bygones and look at the best moments. Well, one of the things that I see hurt people the most is that they stay stuck wishing for a family that they no longer have. And the honest truth is that for a lot of us, if we really dig into it, we're wishing for a family that we never had. We're idealizing the family that we had. We're either taking their best moments and projecting that as to who they actually were, or we're likely really denying a lot of things that weren't very healthy. So it's important to try to see our families for who they really were and not some idealized version that keeps us stuck trying to achieve that. Number 9, we're going to talk about grief in the next 2 just real quick. The grieving process is one of denial, bargaining, anger, depression, and acceptance. And those are not always linear steps where we go through them in order. Just because we've gone through them does not mean that we will never go through them again, that something won't come up that puts us back into one of those steps, a new trigger perhaps. And so, when we leave the cult of Jehovah's Witnesses, for number 9, we're also grieving the loss of individuals. Whether it was those family members, whether it's the loss of the ideal about what we thought our family was. We're grieving the loss of friends, and there were good times in there, so it's not all to be thrown away. But there is a lot of grieving that goes on with the loss of individuals. And then number 10, we are also grieving the loss of our beliefs in some way. Whether like me, you end up doing your research and you land at atheism and a lack of belief, or whether you are a person that does your research and you end up believing in God, whether you call that God Jehovah or something else. The belief system that you held for so long and that dominated your life and was so much a part of who you are, that is gone on some level. And there is grief. There is something to grieve there. And it hits all of us in different ways. Number 11, we're going to talk about activism just for a brief second. A lot of people leave and want to become activists, and that's great. I love it. We need more videos, podcasts, TikToks, whatever the case may be. Getting the message out there is wonderful. But I just want to, as a person that works with people and how they feel and their mental and emotional health a lot of times, just be sure that you're doing okay before you jump into something like that, because you can turn something that could be a blessing to people into a curse for yourself. It is difficult. This is going to get into the next point. So let's go on to number 12. The ex-Jehovah's Witness community is one of trauma survivors, okay? So we've all been through a lot, and that doesn't mean that we've healed. So sometimes then that trauma is reflected in past patterns, repeating things like being judgy, backbiting, lots of drama because people are hurting and they haven't healed. So 11 and 12, if you're going to go into activism, that's wonderful. First, make sure that you've worked on yourself to some degree so that, it's one thing if you're just telling your story, but if you're going to put yourself out there to help other people, please be sure that you are okay, that you feel good. Work on yourself first, because you've got to, first of all, you've got to do it for yourself. And but also, how can, even when an airplane goes down, they tell you to put the oxygen mask on yourself before you do your child, right? We've got to it's our chance finally to help ourselves. Helping other people is wonderful. It can be very fulfilling. But also, don't forget yourself. Don't forget to work on yourself. And then also realize that the community that you're dealing with, we're all trauma survivors. We've all been through a lot. So sometimes it can create, there may be messages that you get and different things that you need to be prepared to handle. So that's just a good thing to have in mind as you move forward, especially if you decide to get into any form of activism. Number 13, learning to trust others means first trusting ourselves and that we can handle what might come from others. A lot of people have distrust of people in the world because we were bred to fear anyone that was not like us or anyone on the outside. But really, we also were never taught to trust ourselves. And you've got to be able to trust yourself and that you can handle the people around you. If you trust yourself, then you know that if you get into certain situations, you can get out of them. You know that you'll see them before they come up, that you're not going to allow yourself to be taken advantage of, or that you won't go down a wrong path. And that's goes to your own inner strength. So that's something that all of us need to do, is learn to trust ourselves. Number 14 cuts a little bit to the grief that we mentioned earlier, but also something that we just need to realize about ourselves. And that is that, so when we are no longer one of Jehovah's Witnesses, we lost our identity. And that identity was handed to most of us, right? We don't know who we are. And we need to be open to learning if we want to move forward and growing and trying new things to see who it is that we are, how we work, how we don't work, what things we like. And it's going to involve getting uncomfortable. So that's just something for a lot of people. A lot of people feel very lost. And a lot of that is because we were never given a chance to form our own identity. One was then handed to us that never was truly authentic. And then we lost that. Number 15, being vulnerable is a strength, not a weakness, if done right. It doesn't take a lot of strength to put up walls and shut people out. It takes far more strength to trust ourselves, to be vulnerable in a healthy way with healthy people. And I recommend this in my coaching practice. I recommend this to anyone out there. The book, The Power of Vulnerability by Brené Brown. It's an audio format only. I don't believe that there's a written version of it. That book is the book on vulnerability, and I highly recommend it to anyone out there seeking to heal in this way. Number 16. So there's a comedian I like named Brian Regan. He has a comedy routine that he does about walking on the moon, okay? He's talking about people sitting around at a gathering, and there's always the guy who wants to one-up everybody else. And he tried telling a story, Brian did, about having 2 wisdom teeth removed. And, but he didn't know he was in the rare presence of someone who had 4 removed. And, of course, the guy had to squash his story, right? And so Brian talks in the comedy sketch about how he would like, can you imagine being an astronaut that walked on the moon? Because if you did that, you've got a story. Even 4 wisdom tooth man has to bow before the presence of I walked on the moon. And the reason I'm mentioning that is because whoever you are watching this, chances are if you left a cult, you have an I walked on the moon story. You have the mic drop story. Don't hide that story. It is not something to be ashamed of, first of all. But second of all, you have something that is deeply interesting to a lot of people. And it's been your life. So own it. And if you share it with other people, perhaps they will take an interest in you. And sometimes you find that other people have had other little things happen in their lives because these are just human stories, not just cult stories. And sometimes when we're vulnerable and we share those things with the right people, they will react in a way where they really appreciate it, where they learn more about us and who we are, and then we can in turn learn about them if that makes them open to being vulnerable and sharing as well. So you have an I walked on the moon story. You walked in an alternate reality. You lived in a reality that most people will never experience. So you have there's a lot to share about your life, and it's not to necessarily be hidden. Number 17 is real quick. Self-care is not selfish. I'll just leave it at that. Number 18, you don't get to put your problems in life off until Armageddon anymore. You don't get to escape into belief and just say, oh, these things are bad or wrong in my life, but Jehovah will fix it. Okay? Nobody is coming to fix your life for you. There is no provable existence beyond this one. So today has great importance. Today is your life, and it's yours. It's nobody else's. So it's up to you to make it better. No one else can do that for you. And in line with that, number 19, freedom is great, but now you're responsible for everything that you do. You can't farm it out to anybody anymore. So that's a really interesting thing that people kind of realize sometimes after they leave, is that it was so easy at times to live in that denial and that somebody else is going to handle it, that Jehovah is just going to magically make everything better. Nope. You're now free, and you're also responsible for your own choices in life, and you get to make them. And that's both the beautiful and wonderful and scary part of it. Number 20, making the truth your own. That's a phrase we used to throw around all the time. But there's really kind of two ways to do it. So some people made the truth their own, and that they took this cult personality, this new personality, and took it on and became that thing. But then other people make the truth their own by taking the parts of the truth, the doctrine of Jehovah's Witnesses that they like, or the parts of the community or whatever it is that they like, and leaving the rest. So they make it more palatable to themselves. Number 21 is a really rough one for a lot of people, and especially people that maybe wake up to the realities of the cult and want to leave. There is a switch that flips when family finds out that you no longer believe the same as them, that you don't want to be one of Jehovah's Witnesses. It is often a sudden, very awful switch that you see flip. Their countenance changes. Boom. They are done with you in that moment. They will say really hateful and nasty things because now they are losing control and they need to gaslight you to try to get you back. So they're going to say whatever it takes to hurt you, and some of the things they'll say is to hurt you or guilt you or shame you to change your mind instantly. So if you're ever going to have these conversations with family, it's easy for us to believe that we are the outlier, we're the special case, but the fact is, usually we aren't. And so it's just a harsh reality that many of us will have to face if we ever want to talk to our families, and especially in a way in which we're telling them that we're leaving. Sadly, we expect them, or we hope, again, the idealizing, that they're going to be human. They're going to still be our mom or dad or whatever. But sadly, that's just not the case. And you have to be prepared for that. Number 22, it's okay to cry. A lot of people were really shamed for crying as Jehovah's Witnesses. I find this a lot in my coaching practice when we're talking about things. I saw it in my own family. You were allowed to cry, but you take that shame and you take it to your room. You go cry in private. We don't want to see that. Okay? We have to allow ourselves to feel our feelings. Crying is not weakness. And for some of us, it might be the first time we're ever allowing ourselves to feel our feelings. So, I know it's tough for a lot of us. After we leave, we're just trying to survive, trying to get by day to day, but it's okay to cry. It's not weakness. It's human. And the fact that so many of us were discouraged from that in the cult is kind of telling about the lack of humanity and the lack of empathy that was so prevalent therein. Number 23, don't throw away the past. It's like the little black box in the wreckage. We can learn so much about ourselves if we look into that black box and what it contains. And also, you can't outrun the past. It's going to be the monkey on your back that travels with you. You have to address it. Denial is not helpful. Number 24. This kind of goes back to episode, I should have had this written down probably, but 77, 78, somewhere in there, I think, where I did an episode about disfellowshipping and the weasel words used around that. Jehovah's Witnesses are all about victim blaming. They try to blame you for being shunned. Shunning is an act that a person does to another person. No one can force you to do that. That's on them. So they aren't honest about it. They have elaborate stories that they use to spin tales to try to make you feel responsible for their feelings and for their actions. And it's simply not true. So beware of the weasel words. Beware of taking the blame for other people's feelings and the reasons behind those things, because it's not your fault that they shun you, okay? It's their fault. They are the ones with the belief system that promotes that. It's not you. Again, shunning is an act that one person does to another person, and you cannot make other people do that. Number 25 is one of my favorites. Acceptance means letting go of the hope that things could have been different, okay? We need to work on understanding how human beings work, including ourselves and everyone that we were involved with, from our family to the elders, the friends, everybody else. We have to work on trying to understand who other people are so that we can let go of the hope that things could have been different, so that then we can get to that part of the grieving process, which is acceptance, where we've let go of the hope. We're no longer stuck. We understand that even the people in the cult were doing the best they could with what they had to offer. And we'll talk about that in a future point. But they didn't have negative intent, and intent matters. Most people thought they were doing the right thing. When we were in, we did too. And so not forgetting who we once were can help us to reach that point of acceptance. Number 26, many developed perfectionism to feel like they had control. If I never do anything wrong, then I can't get in trouble. Or maybe someday I'll be good enough if I do everything right. And if you read the pages of the Watchtower magazines or the books or listen to the talks, they make it sound like you can control your thoughts, all of the time. You can control your feelings, all of the time. You can control your behaviors, all of the time. And that's simply not true. And so because of that, they create a lot of black and white thinking. Things are, you're either going to live at Armageddon or be murdered by your God, okay? There's one of two outcomes. There's no in between. You're either righteous or unrighteous. You're either doing all you can or you're not. There's this black and white all or nothing thinking, which is a cognitive distortion. And if you research cognitive distortions, it's a distorted way of thinking or seeing things, okay? That's what most of us grew up in. I'd like to describe it a lot of times as the funhouse mirrors that have the wavy mirrors or convex mirrors or whatever, concave, that make you look short and squat or tall and skinny or whatever. We grew up not in a funhouse, but in a not so fun house. And most of us were given distorted ways of seeing ourselves and the world around us. And perfectionism is one of those ways. It's a cognitive distortion. And although most people think that being a perfectionist means that, for instance, you must have an immaculate home. No, a lot of times a perfectionist doesn't have an immaculate home. Their home is trashed, because if they can't keep it immaculate, then what's the point? It's all or it's nothing. Okay? And so that's a hallmark of it. That's one of the things that we often can take into our lives. And so I hope you can look for that in yourself and realize that, that it's a thought pattern. It's a way that we think, and it's something that we need to challenge in order to move forward and be happy. Number 27, People will die and funerals will be difficult. Okay? So think about how you want to handle things. And I know that none of us truly knows until we're in that position, but we are going to lose people that one time, maybe our parents, whatever the case may be. And so it's important to try to figure out what you want to do in that situation when it does present itself, because it will. Is that something that you want to ignore? You're done. You've already mourned their loss, like some of us have, and maybe you don't want to go down that path again. Or perhaps you would go to the funeral, but maybe a good strategy would be to bring somebody with you and to have a way out. And if that funeral goes in a way that you don't like, you have support and you can leave. And maybe you find some other way to grieve. But I just want to bring this up because it is something that we all have to consider. Number 28, we were all abandoned, and all relationships, therefore, were very tenuous. And that results in a lot of people having fear when, for instance, you text somebody and they don't text back instantly, or you call somebody and you don't hear back very quickly. It kind of makes us people pleasers, and it makes us very insecure in our relationships because we've all faced such abandonment. Number 29, I kind of alluded to this earlier, but being one of Jehovah's Witnesses is to live a life of denial. We denied our own thoughts on things, our own feelings on things. We saw some truth that contradicted a presently held truth, and we denied that. It's just a life of denial. I think that actually kind of goes back to mentioning it earlier as an addiction. There's a lot of denial that comes with any kind of addiction, right? And so for most of us, we had a lot of denial about how this was really impacting us. And my guess is, our families and everything else, there was just a lot of denial of what was really going on. And I think that's the coping skill that we used in order to get by. But a lot of the coping skills that we develop when we're younger in order to get by are the skills that end up being the problems that we have as adults. So living in firmly rooted reality, challenging things, not allowing ourselves to deny ourselves, deny how we think and feel about things, finding our voice. There's just so many things that go into getting beyond that. But denial had a huge impact on all of our lives. And that kind of bleeds into number 30. You probably discount what you went through. So there's a podcast I like called The Mental Illness Happy Hour. And on it, the host has some surveys, some anonymous surveys you can take on his website. One of the questions that he asks is, were you sexually abused as a child? Or maybe it's just, have you ever been sexually abused? Can't remember the exact wording of it. But the answers are yes, no, or some things happened, but I'm not sure if it counts. And the most responses that he gets go into the latter of the options. And so most people are saying some things happened, but I'm not sure if it counts. And then there's a box underneath whereby people can write in what it is that happened, what it is they're referencing. And what you see are that people then go on to detail specifics of very clear sexual abuse that any outsider would see and say, oh yeah, that's sexual abuse, right? But our brain has a thing, when we endure some sort of trauma, our brain has a mechanism by which it kind of tries to shut that off from us because it's too much to hold or to handle at the moment. And for a lot of us, I think that we went through a lot of trauma, whether it's in leaving Jehovah's Witnesses or whether it was just our life as one of Jehovah's Witnesses, or both. We went through a lot. And it's easy because it was our story, it was our life, to think of it as, it was just normal because it was normal for us or whatever. But that doesn't mean it was healthy. That doesn't mean it wasn't abusive. And sometimes we need to allow ourselves in a healthy way and in a healthy environment to give weight to what it was that did happen to us. Number 31. But in doing so, we're not just seeking to blame other people, but rather to honor our own feelings. So blame doesn't really help a lot, but honoring our feelings and being focused on our feelings and working through those, that actually can help. So we have to balance feeling our feelings and then also the acceptance of others' limitations, so that that acceptance piece, it's not there to deny what happened to us. It's not there to deny us the ability or the right to feel our own feelings, but it's just there to kind of balance it so our feelings don't swallow us whole. But in the end, we need to feel our feelings, and blame isn't going to be the tool that helps get us there. Number 32 is kind of an interesting one. But certain biological needs can override an unrealistic environment. Okay. Let's think about it. Most of the people who are shunned as one of Jehovah's Witnesses, it's often for sexual immorality, right? Or as they would see it, sexual immorality. I'm not calling it that. But because of that, that kind of shows something. So I was contacted by a media company to be on a potential television show. And I won't go into details. I don't know what I can reveal, and it's not going to happen. But the show was going to feature people that were, at least part of it was about, or going to feature people who were currently working in some profession that directly was in opposition to their religious beliefs. Like for me, I'm a cult recovery coach. I help people now recover from the very thing that I used to be a member of, right? And so that's why they reached out. But also, in talking with them, they were really having a hard time finding people that this fit. The few that it did fit were people from different religions, not necessarily ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, but from different religions that were involved in sex work. And what I noticed when he was telling me this, and what I brought up to him, was that, well, what you're seeing there is that the biological needs are overriding the environmental pressures. And so for a lot of people, they've been shamed for whatever it was that got them disfellowshipped. But a lot of times it's just biology, and it's biology versus a restrictive, abusive environment. And so it's just kind of interesting to see that we're just human beings and we do certain things. And it's not just ex-Jehovah's Witnesses. Those things being repressed, as we talked about earlier, created certain storms, so to speak, certain things that happened as a result of that. And so a lot of people were just acting on that, and apparently it's quite prevalent. So it doesn't make you as abnormal, probably, as you have felt being shunned for something like that. Number 33, there's a difference in someone that was disfellowshipped for a behavioral issue and then someone that leaves because they no longer believe. And what I'm really wanting to point out there is that when you're disfellowshipped for whatever reason that Jehovah's Witnesses have come up with and kicked out and shunned, what you have to realize there is that you're not necessarily awake. Just because you've been removed from Jehovah's Witnesses doesn't mean that Jehovah's Witnesses have been removed from you. So there's work to be done there in order to heal. I mean, there's work on both sides. Even if you disassociate, there's work to be done still to heal. But there's a lot more work, perhaps, if you've just been disfellowshipped for some behavioral reason. If you haven't woke up yet to all of the many myriad of realities, harsh realities often, from growing up in that environment and the doctrine and everything else. Number 34, one of the most painful things that I've observed is seeing someone who has been shunned by their own children that they themselves raised in a cult. And so I just want to send out a hug to anyone who's in that situation and ask you to please forgive yourself. Please work on forgiving yourself. You, again, back to intent, you didn't have any malicious intent. Nobody wakes up one day and says, hey, let's join a cult and destroy our family. Nobody does that. You were just a person who was probably hurt, who got caught up in a thing for specific reasons, or you were born into it, or whatever the case. This was the path that resulted, and it does not make you in any way some sort of bad person. I understand that it hurts. I wish there was some way to negate the pain. I understand you're just experiencing normal human pain over an abnormal, inhuman situation. But what you can work on is forgiving yourself, and you deserve that. 35, alluded to this already, but intent matters. What if you move through this world believing that most people had good intent, just poor tools, including yourself, okay? How would that impact the way that you see your interactions? Number 36, Jehovah's Witnesses moralize everything to make you feel bad and to make you feel like you owe something, or you owe someone something, whether it's a deity or another person or whatever the case. They moralize everything. Everything is a matter of choice and shows whether or not you're a good or bad person. And that is not a good way to see life. That kind of bleeds into number 37. Choice isn't absolute. Behind it lies so much. We all bring into any choice we make, we're bringing our base biology, our base psychology, our past experiences and history, our current day circumstances, and whatever mental and emotional tools we've been exposed to and happen to pick up of the ones we've been exposed to along the way. It's not as simple as just choose differently, or you just chose the wrong way so you're a bad person, or whatever the case may be. There are a lot of things behind that, and I could go on and on this one for a long time, but I won't. Just know and just think about that. Think about everything that goes behind why people act like they do, and how much of that they really are in control of when they are making choices in their lives. Number 38, beware of leaving one cult only to fall prey to the next one. Okay? There are a lot of people who leave Jehovah's Witnesses and fall prey to MLM scams or MLM opportunities, network marketing, whatever you want to call it. These organizations that often reflect a lot of the same control that you see in the bite model or the fog model, a lot of the same things that you see in Jehovah's Witnesses. Politics can get very much the same way. So just watch that when you leave Jehovah's Witnesses and there's that vacuum that is created, that it is not filled with something else that gets just as culty. And then that bleeds over into the next point, number 39, culty behavior is not just religious. Don't be surprised if after leaving Jehovah's Witnesses, you start seeing things that trigger you because they have similar hallmarks. Cults are made of humans, and cult behavior is often very tribal behavior. It's very narcissistic behavior, and a lot of times narcissists leading codependence, again, a lot of times. And it is very much found outside of Jehovah's Witnesses because Jehovah's Witnesses didn't create it. This is a human thing. And you can see this in many levels and in many ways. It can add perspective to what we went through, but it can also, it can be discouraging at times to see that. But I hope that if you just look at it through the lens of the fact that this is just a very human thing, and sadly humans haven't progressed beyond that, and that is sad. This is how people get controlled and are controlled in today's society. But it's also something that once you can start to spot, then you are protected from falling prey. Number 40, do you after leaving. Okay, you didn't leave a cult to then go and have to do what everybody else does. So vote if you want to vote. Don't vote if you don't. Celebrate holidays if you want. Don't celebrate them if you don't want to. You finally get to decide these things for yourself. And so your life is yours now. You don't have to now just leave one set of expectations and then join another set. It's your life and you get to decide it and do things on your own time as you are ready. Number 41, there's only one relationship that you will have your entire life, and that is the relationship that you have with you. You will always be there. Other people will come and go. People will die. Other people will leave in different ways, but you will always be there. So you've got to learn how to be your own friend. Many people suffer brutal negative self-talk. I think most people at this point, maybe not, but most people have heard the phrase, you wouldn't talk to your friend that way, so why do you talk to yourself that way, right? And that is a good perspective to have. Why would you do that if you wouldn't talk to your friend that way? But for a lot of people, if we don't really care about ourselves because we've been made not to, then, well, I don't care how I talk to myself because I don't care about myself. Honestly, I was there. But I will say that there was a moment in my life where my wife actually heard me, I don't know what I was calling myself or what I was doing. I had made some small error and was ripping myself verbally. And this was many, many years ago. And my wife said, "Hey, quit talking to my friend that way." And that was a little different perspective. I could see how what I was doing to myself was impacting her. And I did care about her. I didn't care about myself at that point, but I did care about her. And so it was just a different perspective. So let me take this opportunity to address you, whoever you are out there listening or watching who beat yourself up. Please don't talk to my friend that way. My friends deserve better, and that's you, okay? Please don't do that. I know why you do that. I used to do that as well. It's not good, and I know it's hard to even ever think sometimes that you could or would love yourself, but it actually is possible if you work through a lot of things, and it's definitely worth it, and you are worth it. You just don't know it yet. Number 42, your definition of friends may change. You might start realizing that a friend isn't someone that you're totally enmeshed with, okay? Like we were in the cult, we met people, they were fast, automatic friends where we felt we knew each other forever. And because we all had the same cult beliefs and the same feelings and there were the same expectations, we often would find one person, latch on to them, and then become extremely enmeshed. And that's not necessarily what a friend has to be. So a friend can just be the person at work that you talk to and have a good time with. A friend could be someone that you occasionally go out to lunch with, someone that you go to ball games with, have fun joking around with, a person that you share one common interest with and explore with them. Friends don't have to be all or nothing. And that opens up a whole new world of friendship to us. Number 43, productivity is good, but it can also be a trap. We were on a perpetual hamster wheel as Jehovah's Witnesses, always having to be busy for Jehovah, whether it was in study or meetings or service or prayer or dealing with congregational matters or talking to the friends, whatever. Everything revolved around that and had to be productive. But rest, relaxation, and mindless fun are also productive. They're needed for a happy life. So you can't always be on, and being on has deleterious returns anyway. There's a point of diminishing returns at a certain point. So at that point, now you're not being as productive as you thought you could be. So just realize that productivity can be a big trap for those of us who left a cult. Number 44 is a quick one. No is a complete sentence, requires zero explanation, and can set you free. It's just one little syllable, no. That can be an answer to something, and you don't owe anyone anything more than that. So I know it's hard to say, but it's an important one to say, and we need to look at the reasons why it's so hard to say for so many of us. Number 45, there's not just one right way of doing a thing. There's not the truth behind literally the one right path for everything in life. We wouldn't have all the innovations that we have in this world if everybody did things the same way. So sometimes we have to learn how we work and how we do things best, and also not expect others to do things just like we do, because there are many ways to do most things. Number 46, a lot of people are intimidated to do new things, can get back into the perfectionism, and we see everything maybe as pass fail. But I'll just encourage you to see things as experiments in your life, okay? When you're experimenting with something, it's not a matter of pass fail. If you're experimenting with food or trying new food, and you try Mexican food and you like it, and you try, Bangladeshi cuisine and you don't like it, you didn't fail because you don't like the Bangladeshi cuisine. It's just a matter of personal taste. So we've got to stop putting so much pressure and weight on every decision. Sometimes we're just experimenting. We're just trying things. We're seeing what fits, what doesn't, and that's got to be okay. Number 48, back to our parents. If your parents were in a cult, they weren't healthy. You can't be in a cult and be healthy. It's just not possible. So knowing that, we have to realize that we may never get what we want from them, and we may need to find it elsewhere and let go. I don't say this lightly. I'm certainly not making any light of mental illness. I work with people. I have ADHD, and people might classify that as such. So, but we have to set our expectations according to reality. And our parents, being one of Jehovah's Witnesses, is like having a mental illness. It's living in an altered state, an altered reality. They don't live in the real world. And if you really step back and watch many of their behaviors, you will see how immature that they are. And they are stuck in a place. So you can't get water out of a dry well. They likely do not have what we need, never have had what we need. And sadly, they often never will have what we need. So we are going to have to find that elsewhere, and also set our expectations firmly rooted in the reality that our parents and our families, they're just not well. Number 49, beware of allowing that family that is unwell around your kids. Jehovah's Witnesses are going to Jehovah's Witness. They're going to talk about Jehovah. Very rarely is one of Jehovah's Witnesses going to respect boundaries, right? We already talked about that and how they don't even have any for the most part. So just be very careful who you allow around your kids, even though they're family. And I know we all want to believe that our family has our best interests at heart, and they may, but they just may be doing it in a very harmful way. And that doctrine is extremely harmful to children. So just be very careful when dealing with that. And also, I know a lot of people sometimes allow their children to see their parents while they are shunned. And I just want you to think, what does that say to your kids? What do you think your kids are walking away from that feeling? How do you think they have questions about that? What questions do they ask, maybe, if they are asking questions? Do you think that it is healthy for them to see mom or dad being shunned by their parents? I mean, by their grandparents? It's not super dignified. And it can create in your children ways of seeing you at times that aren't as healthy as they could be. I understand why people would do this, why they would allow that to happen. There's just so much shame heaped upon us when we're shunned. But just be aware that little minds and hearts are watching all of this and are listening to what is said and what they're exposed to, and just do your best. Again, not saying there's one right way or wrong way of doing any of this, but just please be careful. Number 50, it's not your fault for being shunned. It's not the fault of a gay person that a homophobe is offended by their existence. That is the fault of the homophobe's narrow, intolerant beliefs. It is not the fault of a black person that there is a white person out there that is offended by their existence. That is the fault of the person that has the racist, narrow, intolerant beliefs. So it's not your fault that you are shunned. You are shunned because of the narrow, intolerant beliefs of the people who shun you. Number 51, just like them giving in to us, okay, as Jehovah's Witnesses could supposedly prevent us from coming back to Jehovah, us giving in to them, if we give in to our witness family members, then we are giving them false hope, and we could prevent them from the pain of having to shun. And I know that sounds weird, but hear me out. One of the things that woke me up was the one thing I could never shake, and that was having to shun my own brother. Never sat well with me. I didn't like it. I could never reconcile how that was humane or healthy to do in any way. It seemed like manipulation on some level. It was. And so there is something to your family having to shun you. I'm not saying that they're all going to wake up because they've had to experience that. I'm not saying that. I'm not extending any false hope. What I am saying is that shunning is one of the most vile things. There's a lot of vile things, but it's one of the vile things that Jehovah's Witnesses force their members to do. And I think it's one of the hardest for most people to reconcile, to not see their loved one daily or weekly or whatever the case would have been because of their own shunning policy. Now, I get it. They spun it around to where they say it's your fault. That's how they get by. But if they still have humanity left in them, they have to know that's not right and that's not okay. And so if we give in to them, we might be giving them false hope that we're coming back. And they don't need that. Most Jehovah's Witnesses can't fathom that anyone doesn't believe this. And they're so narcissistic, they think everyone wants to be them or with them. So they don't need any encouragement. Number 52, beware of magical thinking. There's no quick fix in life. And anyone that's promising you that is promising you the same thing the cult did. There's no magic program out there that's going to heal you in 90 days. You can work on some things and you can find some healing in 90 days for sure, okay? But beware of magical thinking. Big promises were made before to us and they were not true. Number 53, I don't really have time to get into this one deeply, but just observationally, as someone who works with a lot of people, but ADHD and CPTSD or complex PTSD seem to be extremely prevalent. I've been really shocked by how many people I've worked with who have been diagnosed with it, or maybe it's a new thought, but it sure seems to possibly fit. And so if that might be you, feel free to look into either of those in your own time and with, professionals who are there to diagnose such things. But they may help you to understand yourself in some new ways. So just some things to look into, and I hope that helps. Number 54, stop worrying what they think. I know why people do. I get it. I understand that tendency. But after you leave Jehovah's Witnesses, if your life goes well, they're just going to say that Satan's blessing you. If your life goes bad, they're just going to say it's the punishment of Satan's world for leaving Jehovah's protection, right? So no matter which way you go in life after leaving, just make sure you're living your life for yourself and not because you're worried what they're going to think. Because they're going to spin things no matter what you do in life to make it fit their narrative. So it doesn't matter. You might as well just do you and go live your own happy life. Number 55, being bitter is okay for a time. It's not where you want to stay in life, okay? But being bitter or anger is part of the grieving process. I know some people have a hard time with this whole part of existence as one of Jehovah's Witnesses, this bitterness. I get it. You know, Jehovah's Witnesses portray everyone who's an apostate as bitter, right? So then we leave and we're afraid to be bitter. Well, that's just them then controlling our feelings again. It's okay to be bitter. You should be bitter to some degree. It shows that you actually value yourself and that you realize how screwed up what they did to you was. It's okay to be bitter for a time. You don't want to stay there, but it is part of the healing process. And it's okay to experience some bitterness or anger as you're moving forward through your natural process of healing. So don't judge yourself too harshly for that. Just try to work on finding some ways to bring that down, because ultimately it is about you being happy in life. That's something we don't want to let them take from us forever. But they did take a lot, and it's okay to be bitter for a time. Number 56, I talked earlier kind of around the addiction to belief and how it can be just as addictive as a substance and just as hard to beat. But the same also applies to the roles that we play out, the negativity and stress that we were accustomed to. That can be our set point for life and can be a tough one for us. So a lot of times we're still addicted to feeling bad because we know what abuse feels like and we're comfortable in that. We don't know what healthy feels like. That's scary. Number 57 is one that sometimes seems a little surprising, but Jehovah's Witnesses are liars. I know for a lot of us, we thought we were such honest people, but first of all, denial is lying to yourself about the things that are going on around you. We often lie to try to fit in. We embellish things to make ourselves feel or appear to be more than we were because we were insecure. We saw things that didn't add up and we denied those things. We lived double lives. Maybe we suffered from imposter syndrome. Just so many different things, so many different avenues of our lives because we had to live daily an inauthentic life. That in itself is a lie, right? So many of us were lying to ourselves and others on a daily basis, even as Jehovah's, honest people. Number 58, many of us were more emotionally intelligent than our parents or the Jehovah's Witnesses around us. I can't tell you how many kids saw through not just cult doctrine, but also the abuse and fake people. We had good instincts and we were taught not to trust them. So, that may still be true today. Likely, you may still have a hard time trusting your instincts, but also your instincts were always right, or were right a lot of the time. And if you trust those, you will be much more emotionally intelligent than the people who are left behind in the cult. Number 59, you are allowed to change your mind even after you said yes. A yes is not a forever commitment or a dedication to something. You can change your mind. It is okay to learn new information or to have a change in circumstances and to change your mind. You don't need an excuse to validate the change. Sometimes you said yes, you've committed, I'm going to go to a party, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. Day comes and you really don't feel like going. You do not have to deny yourself or deny your own feelings or push through simply because you said yes. You can make that choice if you want, but you're not obligated. We're no longer in a cult. Number 60, we were always trying to earn love, to get our parents to love us, to be enough for them, to get our God to love us, to be enough for him, to gain the approval of the elders, to whatever the case may be. But if love has to be earned, then it can be lost just as quickly. And that's not a great place to be in life. So we have to stop trying to earn something that should be freely given. Love isn't control. Love also isn't codependency. Both of those things are more about ourselves than it is about anybody else. If we're trying to control people, or if we're always trying to control everybody else by managing their feelings or whatever the case may be, neither of those is love. So we have to stop trying to earn love or continuing to be around people who withhold it from us, and find the people out there that give it freely to us and that can accept us and love us for who we are, just as we should ourselves. Number 61 is a concept that many have never heard of, referred to as the gap and the gain. Kind of cuts to our perfectionism, kind of cuts to our negative self-talk, a lot of things. But we, as Jehovah's Witnesses, were taught to look at how far we've got to go and not how far we've come. It was always about making it to the end goal, the paradise, right? So you've got the ideal paradise up here. And let's say you started down here as just a wicked worldly person that wasn't serving Jehovah, all right? And let's say that you studied and you progressed in the truth, and you were now a ministerial servant or whatever position that you attained in the congregation. So you started here and you made it to here, okay? Jehovah's Witnesses and many people focus on the gap, the distance between where they are and the ideal. That's what they focus on. And we measure ourselves against that, and we can never feel like we're enough. But what we fail to realize is the gain, the position between where we are and where we started. And having an appreciation, a gratitude, being proud of the fact that we started in one place and we've gotten to another place. We've got to start appreciating our gains, start appreciating how far we've come in life, especially from our cult background. We've got to start appreciating even just the fact that we could leave it shows a lot. And we'll talk more about that later. But we've got to start appreciating the gains we make and stop always focusing on the ideal and measuring ourselves against that. It doesn't make us happy. Number 62, you were lied to. And not just about things like 607 BCE, but you were told things about yourself and about your worth that were just as much a lie as everything else they were telling you. So the way you were made to feel about yourself was not real. It was a lie. It was their need for control. It was about them. It was never about you. Number 63 is a short one. It shouldn't be hard to name things that you love about yourself. But it is, isn't it? And that's a reflection of the environment that we came from. Number 64 is also another short one. And that is just that many people had stomach issues as kids or adults in the cult. A lot of people suffered a lot of digestive issues. And it's the depression, the anxiety, the pressure, the living an inauthentic life, all of this stuff. It even impacted us physically. Number 65 is about scarcity. For many of us, we grew up materially poor in some ways. Not all of us, obviously. But because of that, there are many people that I've worked with in my coaching practice or that I've known personally that have that scarcity mindset. Instead of an abundance mindset, that there's always more out there. It's a very scarce mindset. It's a fixed pie and I've got to get my piece and I've got to hold on to it for dear life. And because of that, sometimes people have a hard time letting go of things. Sometimes we may struggle with maybe even some hoarding tendencies because it's hard to let that stuff go. It was so hard to come by when we grew up in that kind of an environment, or maybe it's still hard to come by today. But we can work on our mindset around some of these things and create more freedom for ourselves. Number 66 is just a phrase that I read that I thought was very applicable. Um, Maybe you're not really socially anxious. Maybe you've just been around assholes your whole life. Number 67, abuse is abuse. There's no abuse Olympics. You don't get a gold medal for having the most abuse. You don't not qualify if you don't have enough abuse. Abuse is abuse. Any type of abuse, whatever type it is, the feelings produced are the same in us. And I hope that you can lend weight to what you went through, realize those abuses, and honor your own feelings in the way that it's impacted you, and not compare yourself to others, because that's a race to the bottom. That doesn't help. But feeling your own feelings, working through your own traumas, that does help, and I hope that you'll do that. Number 68, we were taught endurance, but not really persistence. We were taught to endure external forces or things that came up against us. We were taught how to endure living every day in a miserable cult. But what we were not taught how to do is to figure out what we wanted in our lives and then to persist in going out and getting that. So that's a whole different way of living life. And so I'll just encourage persistence over endurance and hope that you start really pushing for the things that you want in your life, because again, you deserve those things and we only get one life that we know of. Number 69, don't mistake relief for happiness. Sometimes I was talking with somebody who had taken some Theraflu. I guess they won't be a sponsor after this, for being sick. And we were talking about it, and I've taken it before. Theraflu is nasty. And sometimes I think you just feel better after taking it because you're no longer drinking that stuff. It's terrible. So don't mistake relief for happiness. You're not well after you're done drinking it. It's just the relief of that being over with. So when we leave Jehovah's Witnesses or whatever, we may feel some relief getting away from toxicity or the cult itself, the doctrines, whatever. But that's not necessarily happiness. That can oftentimes just be the letdown, the relief afterward. And, happiness is something that we may still need to persist in pursuing. Number 70, talked about grief a little bit already, but a quote I like is that grief is love without a home. So we need to find a new home for our love after we leave. If you don't move forward and find love in your life again, from whether it's the ability to give love to people or receive love, then you'll probably find yourself longing for what's behind you. Number 71, many people struggle to talk about their experience in their life because they just don't know how to get into it. Or when people ask them certain things like, are you going to celebrate the holidays with family this year? How do you explain that you've never maybe even celebrated holidays and now have no family because they all shun you? That's difficult, right? So in business, sometimes there's something called an elevator pitch, okay? Basically, if you were on an elevator with someone that you wanted to sell to, and you only had the time between one floor and whatever the next one was they were going to on the elevator to pitch them your idea, your product, whatever it was, your service, what would you say to them? Only have a few sentences. So my encouragement here is to have your own elevator pitch. Have something or some things in mind that you would say when these situations come up, so that you can be prepared, not feel so caught off guard and overwhelmed with emotions in the moment, and actually feel confident. And there's nothing wrong with practicing that as well, so that you can better take care of yourself. Number 72, anger is often an expression of deep underlying sadness. So when you feel a lot of anger about what has transpired in your life or where you are today or what happened to you, please be sure to look underneath that layer at the sadness that exists underneath it, because anger is often just the expression of it. And I know sometimes we might feel like the sadness will swallow us whole. So feel free to reach out to someone for help. But if we can address that underlying sadness, oftentimes the anger will come down as well. Number 73, you might be walking around with a savior complex. trying to rescue the world around you, trying to rescue adults or offer unwanted and unasked for advice to other adults that didn't ask for your advice, being a fixer or a rescuer. It's not really healthy boundaries. Teachers don't go around teaching people that don't sign up for their class. So, if you think about it as Jehovah's Witnesses, we thought we were going to save the world. We were going to go door to door with a message that was going to save everyone, right? And sometimes that's hard to let go of, that need to save others. But the reality is, for most of us, we need to save ourselves. We're the only person that we can really impact. And if we save ourselves and we're living a good life, other people might come to us and ask us questions because they're attracted to the type of lifestyle that we're living. And then we can help people because now they're asking. But this, going around cold calling, pitching people all the time on your methodology or whatever you think would make their life better, if they're not asking for it, that's something we do have to watch out for. We can't save anyone. Even the things I'm telling you right now, these are just things that I've learned in this process. I can't save anybody. In my coaching practice, I can't save anybody. I can help people challenge their perspectives. I can help people develop some new tools. I can help people understand some patterns that they may be repeating. Maybe see something in a new light, or start to actually love and care for themselves, or be able to speak up. But I can't do that for them. Every person that I work with has to do that on their own. At least they're raising their hand coming to me because they want help. And so that's different. But, I don't think that anything I'm putting out here today is going to save. I'm not sitting here trying to save anyone. These are just some things that you can use and hopefully take into your own life and use those things to move forward in some healthy ways if something here resonates with you. But I can't do it for anybody, and I don't need to save anybody anymore. I no longer have the one and only truth. And so, each person needs to figure out who they are and how these things resonate with them in their own life and take those and then go work on them. But nobody else can do it for you, and you can't do it for anybody else. With that in mind, number 74, you can't wake somebody else up who is fully asleep, and it's not your responsibility. Bargaining is part of the grieving process, and sometimes we want to think we can have everything, and we can wake people up, or whatever the case is, to come out with us. I'm not saying it never happens. I've got my wife today, but did I wake her up, or did I just help quicken the process for her? Because she already had a lot of doubts and a lot of her own issues, right? So you can't really, if someone's truly fully asleep, you're not going to wake them up. If someone already has doubts, you might be able to quicken that process, to hasten it, to expedite it for them, but you're not going to go around just saving everybody. Sometimes people want to go back because they think they're going to save people. Again, not saying there's no outliers and that it's never been done, but you didn't save them. You could, at best, expedite the process if they already had cracks in their foundation. And 75 is a quick one. What others say about me is often about them, not about me. And that really applies to Jehovah's Witnesses. What they say about me now as an apostate really has very little to do with me. They don't even know me. It's just a reflection of who they are. Number 76, we often don't really realize how stressed we are because we kind of created a high stress floor as Jehovah's Witnesses, living that life, being so hyper vigilant all the time, always having to be on, hiding some of the truth about ourselves in order to stay in the truth. Those things created a lot of stress. And so it's not unusual sometimes after leaving to find yourself either recreating a lot of stress because that's what you're accustomed to, or with a high stress threshold and tolerating way more than you probably really should in your life. So it's just something to be aware of. Number 77, security is inverse to freedom. Prisoners have the most security and the least freedom. So life involves risks and being vulnerable if we really want to be truly free. You can't run from it or we'll just end up being prisoners again. And we've already been there, done that, and it wasn't fun. Number 78, we were taught to compare ourselves to other people. And the reality is that steals our joy and our happiness in life. We were always comparing ourselves as witnesses with other people's service time, how they were when they got baptized, their speaking ability, their comments, if they were more in their own words, your clothing, your accessories, your car, whatever. Jehovah's Witnesses are very appearance focused, and we were always comparing ourselves to the outside and what we could see externally from other people. But again, we don't really know other people. Heck, a lot of us don't even really know ourselves, right? And we're still on that journey. So the phrase that I like in this instance is something that we were all taught all the way back in elementary school. Keep your eyes on your own paper. Worry about yourself. Don't worry about what somebody else is doing. If we do that, we'll be a lot happier. Number 79, fear ruled the day as one of Jehovah's Witnesses. So what I'm about to do here is go over the fog, fear, obligation, and guilt just briefly in these next three. So 79 is about fear. We were ruled by fear in the cult. It was fear of Armageddon, of disappointing Jehovah, the elders, in our own family, fear of the government. A lot of people were afraid of doctors. There's a lot of fear around any establishment. There's a lot of talk today about conspiracy theories and such. Being one of Jehovah's Witnesses is living in a conspiracy theory. Okay, everything is a conspiracy. This, Satan rules the governments and all these different entities and systems. And so fear dominated our lives a lot as Jehovah's Witnesses. And the question is, does fear dominate your life today? Number 80, the next part of the fog model, the O, is obligation, right? So we made commitments to Jehovah and the organization, and we owed God because we had gotten baptized. We owed Jehovah. Or we owed Jehovah because of the concept of original sin. We were just born with an obligation. It really creates this life of living from behind, always in debt, always owing someone or something, and it doesn't feel good. So the onus was always on us serving something outside of ourselves. But what about you? Again, self-care is not selfish. So where is this obligation to others above yourself showing up in your life? Are you kind of maybe still living or repeating those codependent patterns that we received either from our family or from the cult itself? So these are just things to look for in ourselves, and then we'll move on to the next one. And that leaves us at number 81, which is guilt. So the last part of fog is guilt. Everything in the cult is about guilt. I did a bad thing. But honestly, it goes a little bit beyond that to shame, which is I am a bad person because I did a bad thing. Remember, we talked about how Jehovah's Witnesses moralize everything. So is that true? Are you a bad person? I personally I'm not a huge believer in good and bad people. I see people more on a spectrum between unhealthy and healthy. We're all on there in some way. And then, hurt people end up hurting other people. Obviously, some may be toxic, and we don't have to be around people that are toxic. But at the same time, how do we feel about ourselves? Do we feel shame, like we're a bad person just because of who we are or things we've done in the past or whatever the case may be? We've got to start letting go of that guilt or shame that we are somehow a bad person because of our past. Most of us are not bad people. At worst, we were just hurt people that repeated some patterns. Now we have a chance to change. Number 82. New triggers can make you feel like you've lost all progress, okay? So sometimes something will come up and it's just going to hit you from a weird angle. You've never thought of something before, or it's just from a different angle than something you've thought of. And because of that, you may feel like, oh no, I'm back in the grief process, or oh no, I'm reverting in some way. That's not necessarily true. Just because you've healed in some area doesn't mean you've healed in all aspects of that area. And so maybe something's just hitting you anew, and that's okay. You don't have to worry that it means that you're suddenly going to lose all the progress that you've made. Number 83, we're going to talk about self-censoring. Everything as Jehovah's Witnesses is run through certain filters. We filter our expressions. We live in silence and didn't speak up for things that we really probably should have. We kept our doubts to ourselves. There were thought stoppers that we were taught to keep us from thinking deeply about things. We may have spoken one way. Maybe we cussed at school or work, but we didn't around the witnesses, right? So we were always censoring ourselves, and we need to be able to be ourselves and find our voice and realize that not everybody around us in this wide world is as judgmental and controlling as Jehovah's Witnesses. And if people don't like you for who you are, maybe you just got the wrong people. There are other people out there. There are 8 billion people on this planet. Surely there's somebody out there who would like you for you. Number 84 is something I touched on a little bit earlier about the need to be productive, but I want to talk about how rest is productive. Watching TV can be productive, and it doesn't have to be educational to be productive. We all need downtime. Self-care, these can be part of self-care. Self-care is productive. So we have to stop looking at productivity the way Jehovah's Witnesses do, and frankly, the way a lot of the world does, and start to take care of ourselves maybe for the first time. Number 85 cuts to a concept, the fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. And I don't really have time to get into it, but there was a book, I think it's by Carol Dweck, named Mindset, that really talks about this a lot. There's a lot of articles out there if you want to look it up, fixed versus growth mindset. But if you think about it, Jehovah's Witnesses kept us from growing. They put us in a little tiny box. It's a fixed area in which we had to explore. They discouraged our dreams. They limited our potential. They labeled everyone. They ridiculed intellectual curiosity. They pushed binary thinking. So we were given a very fixed mindset. And after leaving, we may have to work on more of a growth mindset and changing the way we see things, because things aren't fixed where they are. We can all grow. Number 87 is something I like to point out to people, and I hope you can really hear this. It's the environment, not you. It was never about you. There may be some effects of the environment that you grew up in that you're still dealing with, but those things weren't you. They were predictable outcomes and results of growing up in a certain environment. And you're likely not much different than any of the other ex-Jehovah's Witnesses that I've worked with and coached, or who are listening right now. We often think that we are damaged in a different way, and that's just often not the case. Also, we can all heal from this, and we can have better things, because again, it was the environment. It wasn't you. So now you can create a new environment for yourself, or expose yourself to a new environment, and actually start to live a new way, and then lose a lot of the things that you grew up with because they were environmental. And I really hope that you can hear this, because again, it was never about you. I know you were hurt by it, but it was the environment. You're not somehow flawed. All right, so now we're at number 88. Anxiety is a normal byproduct of growing up in a cult. Always looking over your shoulder, every decision holding the eternal fate of yourself or someone around you if you stumble them, or your relationship with Jehovah, or whatever the case may be. It's normal for that to create anxiety, and then that is something that often follows us after we leave. Number 89. Buying gifts often feels awkward for people after leaving. That's not something we were experienced in as Jehovah's Witnesses. Very rarely did we give gifts. People like experiences, food. There are safe gifts out there, like those things that you can give to people. Everybody eats. People like to go to places. So experiences, food, those are good things. And really, it's not something to be overthought. Ultimately, it truly is the thought that counts. The fact that you did try and that you got someone something. And most people aren't going to be jerks about a gift that you give them. It's supposed to be fun. So it's a new thing for a lot of us after we leave. And I think we put a lot of pressure on ourselves. But for the most part, it's just going to be fun. Just buy someone something you think they like or would like, and they're going to receive it graciously and enjoy it. People on the outside aren't quite like they are on the inside in the cult. Number 90, you may be sabotaging relationships and getting them before they can get you. That's something that we can find ourselves doing because we're hurt and we're not really ready for healthy vulnerability yet. Number 91, let's talk about college. Now, college could be something that you love, but you don't have to go just because you weren't allowed to go. So make sure that you're in a position to go if that's what you want, and make sure that you're running towards something, not just running away from the cult's values. And if you do that, then you're going to have a better experience. Number 92, ex-Jehovah's Witness friends often have the same blind spots that you do. So although it feels comfortable oftentimes to have people who understand our experience, don't forget that there's a whole world out there to explore. And it's hard to grow in a community where everybody's got the same blind spots. So be sure to go outside of your comfort zone, because that's usually where growth and better things are in the end anyway. Number 93, do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? Right fighting doesn't necessarily make a person happy. We did that as Jehovah's Witnesses, always ready to argue about the minutia of everything. You see it in the world around us on social media, and it may trigger you to want to jump in because it's familiar, may even feel comfortable. But it is a trap, and you can end up getting addicted to that, just like everything else we've talked about so far. So just be aware of that. Number 94, something that helps people at times is to get a photo of yourself as a child. We all start off as this little form of ourselves that's kind of the best us, the purest us, I should say, the purest form of us. Just being a little kid, you have no cares, you're just wanting to enjoy life, whatever, make friends, get dirty outside, whatever the case it is for you, right? And that's the reality for most of us. Most of us just started off life just as a kid, wanting to have fun. And then all these other expectations and circumstances and developments, events, all these other things were heaped upon us, and they kind of really clouded over who we really were in our purest state. And so get a photo of yourself as a kid, maybe one that means something to you, or maybe it was around a time that there was a trauma or something, and look at that picture. That's you, okay? What would you say to the little you? What advice would you give that child that you're looking at? Maybe some advice you give them specifically that will help them through the next years. What would it feel like to give them a hug? How would you parent yourself better than you were parented? Just do that. It can be a healthy exercise for people at times. It can help us to realize really how small we were and how large what we were up against was. Number 95, let's talk money. Money matters, and you likely weren't taught anything about it. Dave Ramsey's Baby Steps, I highly recommend them. So you can feel free to Google that. Dave Ramsey, Financial Peace, I think was one of his books. But his baby steps work. If you work them, they do work. I can attest to that. And there are other schools of thought out there. So you don't have to do the Dave Ramsey thing or whatever the case. Do your own thing, create your own, whatever. But it doesn't hurt to get input from people who have been there, done that, and done better than you. It doesn't, don't get caught up in that fixed mindset where you're embarrassed because you haven't done well or whatever. I've talked specifically about my struggles and where they were, though now, thanks to actually following Dave Ramsey's steps, that's not the case. So have a growth mentality. Look toward people who have done something that you want to do, and then just learn from them. There's plenty of ways to do that. There's so much out there today. So find something to fit you, do that, and your money will reflect a lot of your life. And if your money's not right, there's a chance some other things aren't maybe really going as well as you had hoped. And that's okay. We all struggle in ways. There's no shame in any of this. It doesn't make anyone a bad person. Just got to learn some new things, do some new things, and hopefully, perhaps over time, we can change our trajectory and have some better things in our lives and be happier. And not that money means everything, but it can give you some other freedom. So I hope you'll consider that. Number 96. We talked about giving gifts earlier. Now let's talk about receiving gifts. Learn to accept gifts without having to give anything back in return. That person already found value in you, and that's why they wanted to give you something. So now you just have to listen to that message and start believing it about yourself. But you don't have to give someone else something just because they gave you something. 97. If your parents did contraband searches of your room as kids, you aren't alone, and it reinforced that lack of boundaries that was present at the Kingdom Hall. Nothing was yours, not your mind, not your heart, not your body, not even the physical space or objects around you. So you're not alone if that happened to you. Number 98. Leave the cult however you need to leave it. If you end up getting disfellowshipped, okay. If you want to fade, okay. If you want to disassociate, okay. People should be happy for you leaving instead of right fighting and projecting about how you do it as though they have the one and only true way of getting out of a cult. It's something that I see all the time. People say, and it particularly happens to people who want to disassociate. People say things like, well, that just gives them, you're just playing into their hands. You're playing their game. You don't think you have to play their game when you fade and you can't be who you are or post who you are on social media, or when you have to go to family and pretend to be someone you're not so that they think maybe you're still going to the meetings or whatever. We were all impacted by this. They do have power over us. And it's not just what we give them. They took that from the time we were children, for most of us. Okay? Our family is caught up in this thing oftentimes. So the quaint little sayings that people have out there, or the dismissive way that they view how other people leave, I really just, it's not productive. And we're supposed to learn, again, back to boundaries, right? If somebody else wants to do a thing a certain way, be happy for them. Let them do it their way. You don't know all of their circumstances, and they're not asking for you to rescue them or tell them the one right way to do it. Just be happy that they're getting out however they want to get out. There's a lot of projection that goes on in these kinds of discussions. And I just am happy that you get out. Every one of the ways to leave has its own pros and cons. If there was a good and easy way to get out that resulted in them having no power over any of us, then they're not a cult. They're a cult. One of the hallmarks of that is that there is no easy way to leave. Even if you fade, there are always outliers out there that I just walked away. Great, that's wonderful. But most people don't have that experience. Plenty of faders end up getting shunned anyway. You know what I'm saying? So just because that's how you chose to leave doesn't mean that's how someone else needs to choose to leave. And we need to learn to appreciate and support one another by supporting other people's decisions on how they want to get out and not force our own on them. So I hope that maybe somebody out there hears this and we can support one another. I'll say for myself, when I left, I wanted to disassociate. That was my path. And I cannot tell you how harmful it was to have people coming to me constantly belittling me and belittling my choice because of the way that I left. And so I'm projecting here, right? I'm telling you my story, right? But what I'm telling you is, I'm telling you this as a cautionary tale. You can discourage people from leaving. You can really impact the way they need to leave for themselves. I'm glad I didn't listen to other people, and I did it the way I needed to do it for me. Because at the end of the day, that is one of the biggest moments for most people in their Jehovah's Witness or ex-Jehovah's Witness lives. That moment when you leave and how you choose to do so is huge. So we need to stop farming it out to other people and letting other people tell us how to do it, because we need to make this decision on our own, and other people need to stop trying to tell us how to do it because we need to make such a large decision on our own. Nothing wrong with getting some feedback, but it can really get contentious, and it's a very strange thing that I see in the ex-Jehovah's Witness community. I hope that over time we can just support one another and however each other person needs to leave, and realize that they're living their lives and they're going to deal with the consequences of that, and just be happy that they're getting out and that they're free. That's what matters. And then they're going to have a lot of their own healing to do, just like you do. I have done, everyone, right? So we're all on our own journey, and we need to start respecting that with one another. Number 99, you are so much stronger than you think. You left a cult, and I don't care how you got out. I don't care if you were kicked out in disfellowship. I don't care if you faded and walked away. I don't care if that means that you're still playing certain games. I don't care if you disassociated and played. It doesn't matter. We were all playing their games at some point. However we ended the game, you are so strong for having done that. Do you realize what it takes to leave a cult? Again, you've got the I walked on the moon story. You've got the I got off the moon story by myself. That is a very difficult thing to do. Most people, just to, even if you left behaviorally, the fact that you're listening to this says to me that you probably woke up or you're in the process of it. And that takes so much strength and courage. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's feeling the fear and doing something anyway. To wake up to the realities of all this requires intellectual and emotional honesty, even though it hurts. That's really difficult for most people, to change their minds about something, even though it hurts in the face of new evidence. That's really difficult. Very rare. Personal integrity. Okay, you're showing personal integrity instead of integrity to Jehovah, integrity to a cult, whatever. Personal integrity. You're actually taking a stand for yourself. You're actually showing care for others, for the other 8 billion people on this planet, that you would go be one of them. It shows humility. It shows curiosity. It shows self-respect, strength, independence, openness, a measure of trust in yourself, at least in that moment, sincerity. We traded long suffering. I hate that term. Long suffering for self-care. That's a much better way of living life. You've done so much for yourself already. Don't stop. Allow yourself to feel good about what you've done for yourself. Recognize these qualities and then look for them in yourself and how you can take those on into your life now to create more happiness for yourself and for those around you. And now for the drum roll. This leads us to number 100. I'm going to do something now that I've done in my groups at times that often, brings the conversation to a halt. But I hope you'll hear me out. As Jehovah's Witnesses, our whole lives, we were made to feel bad about ourselves. And if I'm holding a group coaching event and we're having a great time and we're conversing and everything is going wonderfully, if I want to make it stop, all I have to do is say, hey, name one thing you're proud of yourself for. Or what's your proudest moment? Or what are some qualities you appreciate about yourself? Or how have you shown up for somebody else in your life that you are really proud of because it really shows some good qualities in you? We struggle with this. We shouldn't. It's a reflection of the environment that we came from, because those were all lies, remember? So a good thing for people to do is to have a gratitude journal, right? You ever heard of that? Maybe you sit down at night and you write down a couple things that you were really grateful for in your day, or that you're grateful for in your life. We all have a negative bias as human beings. Evolutionarily, it kept us from getting eaten by lions, or it kept us away from other sick people because we were looking for the dangers and trying to avoid those things. And so we all have an inherent negativity anyway. Then we were raised in a cult that was extremely negative. This old wicked system of thing. Oh, woe is me. I'm just, trying to get through the mire and the muck of this system. And I'm just a good for nothing slave of Jehovah. That stuff's not true. And that's extra negativity that you're walking around with you don't need. And so sometimes, when a person maybe is battling depression or some tough times, depending on circumstances or if it's clinical or whatever, sometimes you might recommend something like a gratitude journal. Trying to sit down and actively focus on some positive things in your life, because it makes you start looking for them. And it really can turn around the way you see things. It can really be a good thing in your life. So what I'm going to recommend that you do is do a self-gratitude journal. Okay? I know this is hard, and I know this is a big ask, but I also know that at some point we've got to start looking for these things within ourselves. Maybe hard to do by yourself, but maybe write down one thing a day at night that you can appreciate about yourself that day. Some things, a way that you showed up for others, a way that you showed up for yourself, something about yourself that you like, a good quality, whatever it is. Just write one thing down a day that you like about yourself. I know that sounds impossible, and a lot of you are cringing right now just hearing me say this, but it could be very helpful if you could do that and start fighting the negativity that was, again, a lie, with some things about yourself that are positive. And I know they're going to feel like a lie, but they're actually probably more true than anything else you believe about yourself. And, I often say, I wish I could get the people that I coach all together in a room, and I wish they could see one another, see how strong one another is, and they would appreciate the other person and the other stories. Or the people you right now, chances are you've listened to some of Sean, you've heard other stories, and you could appreciate what they've gone through, and you can see the strength in them. You've got that same stuff inside of you. And you've just been lied to, so you can't see it. They've tried to blind you to it for their own purposes through so many of the things that we've already talked about in this list. So I hope you'll give yourself a chance. You don't have to do it perfectly. You don't have to do it every day. You just got to do it at some point. I'm actually going to create prompts in the private Board of Defectors group that I'll mention here in a minute. For my Patreon followers, there will be details sent out to everyone about that, and we'll create a greater group and maybe eventually a greater list. Of prompts, and eventually maybe we'll share that. I'm considering creating an actual journal with the prompts in it, or maybe even an app or something like that to help people along that path. And I understand that a lot of people are going to feel very uncomfortable about it. If nothing else, if you don't trust yourself, at least look for where other people say good things about you. And after just saying thank you, because I know it's hard, you don't have to be self-deprecating about it though. After saying thank you, maybe take that to heart and ask yourself later, are they wrong? When they're telling you something nice about yourself, are they wrong? Is there something wrong with them that's making them do this? Or is it possible that you don't see yourself accurately? If you get a nice email, create an attaboy or an attagirl folder on your email, on Gmail or whatever service you use, and take that kind note or that kind message and put it over in that folder and look at it occasionally, because those people aren't all lying to you. They have nothing to gain from that. The cult lied to you and had a lot to gain from that. So I hope you'll look into what you can gain from actually seeing yourself in a positive light, because it could change a lot for you. Speaking of which, I want to take just a second to thank everybody that has taken their time to support what I do. And I want to also ask for your support in some very specific ways and give you some ideas on how you can help. When you share an episode with a friend or on some platform, that's very helpful. Like this episode here, I hope will help a lot of people. But I can't be everywhere and share it everywhere. So if other people share this, then it reaches more people and then it helps them. And that's kind of why I do what I do. So, I hope that you'll help share the love and spread these things around that can help other people. And, with regard to the General Shun podcast, we don't always just have to share things in ex-JW ways. These are human stories, not just ex-cult stories. We experience narcissism, gaslighting, so many things that other people have experienced as well. I know for a fact that there are some people who listen because they grew up in a narcissistic family and they were never in a cult, but this just resonates with them. And I love that. My dream is that someday these stories go mainstream, and that's never going to happen if we keep them all inside the ex-Jehovah's Witness community. We've got to start getting these things out in other ways as well and sharing them to other people, because we do have fascinating stories. We have the I walked on the moon story, and people are interested in this. And so perhaps we can help more people and shed more light on this if we share this stuff. So just throwing that out as one way to help. You can also support the guests by leaving comments of support for them on my website at shunpodcast.com. Or maybe when I release an episode and I announce it in the Facebook support group for Shun Podcast or on my personal profile or whatever. It means a lot to people that are being so open and vulnerable and putting themselves out there. It means, I can't tell you how much it means. I get messages from people who appreciate the support that they've gotten so much. And, for them to be appreciated in some way, and it gives you an opportunity as well to show your appreciation. So just leave a nice remark for somebody. I know like on YouTube here, I don't have the comments open because I can't be everywhere. I can't do everything, and I can't moderate everything that goes on. And I don't want to subject the lovely people who are being so open and so vulnerable to a bunch of trolls on YouTube. So that's why I don't have the comments open typically. It's just too much. But you can always go to my website. They're on the episodes page. Click on their episode and leave a comment at the bottom. And I forward every one of those individually to the person who told their story on the podcast. Okay. So because I don't have a system that does it automatically. I've tried different things. It hasn't worked, whatever. But I actually forward them to those people individually, and they appreciate them. So I wish more people would do that, because I think it would really encourage the people who have been brave enough to tell their story. Another important way that you can help is to leave 5-star reviews of the podcast. Highly rated podcasts with lots of good ratings are found easier on the algorithms on iTunes, YouTube, whatever platform is out there. If you don't like me or my style, and I've seen the comments and some don't, that's fine. But rate it 5 stars and then slam me in the comments if that's what you want, okay? But it boggles my mind sometimes that anybody would rate something like this or what any other ex-witness does as, and I get it that the witnesses do it, but it blows my mind that an ex-Jehovah's Witness would rate any of this less than 5 stars and prevents it from being seen or shared with other people through these types of algorithms just because you don't like the sound of my voice, you don't like the song that I chose, or whatever the case may be. Don't hide the stories just because you're trying to make a point that honestly isn't going to land anyway. It doesn't help anything. So I just hope that we'll support good work in this community. It helps propel these messages forward so that they can reach and help more people. It's about the greater good, not like, look, and I get it. Maybe I'm not for everyone, and that's fine. I'm not trying to be either. As I talked about earlier, I'm just trying to be me, the best me I can be in that moment for the person that shows up in front of me. And we all have different styles, and that's fine. I have no problem with that. But I hope that we can propel these stories by supporting one another, because to me, again, just like how you leave the cult doesn't matter to me. I just want to see these stories get out there into the mainstream, and the more they're seen, the more they can help people. So let's not shoot ourselves in the foot here. So leaving thumbs up, giving a thumbs up on a YouTube video, leaving a positive review, subscribing to my channel, whether it's on YouTube or on any podcast services, like those things tell those platforms that what is being done here is relevant and helpful and that people like it. So, it's easy to think maybe, well, somebody else will probably do that. Like, I don't need to do that. Somebody else will do that. But if everybody thinks that, then nobody does anything. So if there are so many little ways, it's like as Jehovah's Witnesses, we were so diligent about leaving little tracts and sharing our message in every way. We have that opportunity now in the ex-Jehovah's Witness community to support other people's work just by clicking a bell to get notifications, or leaving a thumbs up, or leaving a kind comment to somebody, or leaving a review, or whatever. Our message gets out there more. And if you don't do it for me, that's fine. Go find somebody else that you like and do it for them. But let's get these messages out there. This is how we can all work together to do a thing, and we can all support one another. All the wonderful people that are vulnerable enough to tell their stories, me, the whole thing gets supported by this. So I hope that these are some simple ways that you can support, and they don't cost you a dime. And of course, finally, you can support financially if that's what you want to do at patreon.com/shunned for as little as $1 a month. Again, I think sometimes we think that other people are probably supporting, so there's no reason for us to do so. It's easy to overlook things like this, but these episodes, the platform, the tools that are used to create them, the equipment, the studio, it all takes time and money to create. Patreon at one time allowed me to give little tangible goods away. And we used to have the Panda Paradise plush pandas. Say that 5 times fast. So we had the Panda Paradise plush pandas that I would give away to people who donated at a certain level. But then sales tax got weird through Patreon on all that stuff. And it was right around the time that I ran out anyway. So I had to stop doing that. But I do offer rewards to people. And starting now, those rewards will be available to anyone that supports at any level. So as little as $1, you now get to join what I call my board of defectors. And, of course, I hope you'll consider donating more than $1. But if that's what you can do, donate $1. And if you can't donate anything, there's so many other ways to help. It's not all about money. But, I previously had the board of defectors set up at the $20 a month level. And now I'm just going to make that available to everyone. So that means that everyone that is already a patron will now be included in the board of defectors. You can join the board of defectors Facebook group that is private and get behind the scenes information on the show. You can ask me questions at times if that's what you want to do if you're an active patron. You also get merch at cost from the site that I use to create shirts and stickers and other swag. So I won't make a dime off that. It won't support me. But you get it at cost. Okay. So those are the things that I've previously had available to Board of Defectors members. So, I will be again reaching out to everyone and letting them know how to access that stuff now that I'm going to offer that. But, I'm also going to include in that supporter group that will be on Facebook and is on Facebook, I'm also going to include that growing list of self-gratitude prompts to help. I'm also going to include the update episode when I get that ready here shortly from the people who were on the first 100 episodes. So I do want to add value there, and I appreciate the people that have showed me support already without me doing anything extra, just because you support the podcast and the work that I do and everything. I mean, that means the world to me, that anybody would take their hard-earned dollar, or from wherever you live, whatever currency that may be, and use that to support what I do, just because you think that it's worthwhile and you appreciate the time and effort that I put into it. I mean, that means the world to me. And so for whatever reason that you do support, if you support to get some of these bonuses, that's cool too. I'm just happy to get support, because this is a lot. And on a personal note, I can't thank everyone enough for the last 4 years, really. The kind emails that I've received, the people that have let me know that the podcast has helped them in some way, seeing people disassociate and leave the cult after listening to these stories. I mean, that stuff is magic. That's the stuff that fuels me. And, activism isn't easy. It's a tremendous amount of work, sometimes frustrations. There are a lot of aspects about it that I'm not going to mention that are untoward, as this is a celebration right now. But when I see people supporting myself and other guests in whatever way, that makes my day. When I see somebody changing their family tree by leaving a cult and stopping at times what is generational abuse, that makes my day. When I get kind messages of appreciation from someone, that makes my day. And when those days add up, I stand back and see that these last 4 years have really been wonderful, and how many days have been made by the work that I get to do. It's truly humbling. I love everyone that listens and that supports this community of people that are shunned. You're truly amazing and great people, and I wish you hadn't been lied to your whole life and made to feel like you weren't enough. And I hope that someday you can start to see yourselves the way that I see you, or the way that you see other people that are on this podcast and this program. So, as I end all episodes and have from the beginning, love yourself and others, do no harm, and go be happy.